Welcome to Future Proof, where we speak with leaders making the business case for sustainability. I'm Alexa from Watershed, and today I'm asking a deliberately provocative question. Is the climate economy dead? Hopefully not. Not long ago, it seemed inevitable that the global economy was moving away from fossil fuels, and this transformation would create tons of upside for businesses that invested early in a greener future. But here we are in 2025, and headlines, at least here in the US, tell a different story. Climate tech funding fell 40% last year, and the current US administration is rolling back major climate policies. So is this moment a real shift in the economy or just a temporary vibe shift? To help me figure this out, I'm joined by Dumas, general partner at Lowercarbon Capital. Clay and the Lowercarbon team have been investing in climate solutions for years, and their portfolio includes everything from Crusoe, which uses stranded energy to power AI workloads, to Carbon Engineering's massive direct air capture plants. Full disclosure, they're also an investor in Watershed. I can't wait to hear what Clay has to say about this current moment, so let's get started. Clay, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
So we start every episode with kind of a weird icebreaker question. Everybody who comes on this podcast works in sustainability in one capacity or another. And so we ask everyone, what is your home sustainability quirk, the thing you do that's like a little bit more sustainable than other people that maybe people make fun of you for at home? I'll share mine first. I've shared on previous episodes that I experimented with reusable toilet paper. It did not take. My family did not like it. And so today I'm sharing a different one. Soap. So we've been on this journey where we used to use the hand pump soap, and then we tried to eliminate plastic and liquids. And so now we use these beautiful, like locally made in Missoula, Montana soaps, and they smell really good and they have a sense of place. And so yes, it's a little messier, but that's my random thing. Do you have
Alex,
one you'd like to share?
I feel like we have a long list of lessons to trade here. This is not going to be my answer, but we are also soap fanatics.
But there's more. Okay.
There's more. There's more that comes from. I've gone so deep, it's embarrassing sometimes. But at this point, number one quirk, I think the kind of quasi-religious figure in our household is our mill.
Nice.
Put an inordinate amount of vegetable and fruit scraps into our mill. They're machines that dry and grind your food up, and the result is sort of like if you mixed a bunch of coffee grounds with Thanksgiving dinner. In terms of the smell, it's like there's no stinkiness, there's no fruit flies.
Okay, thanks for indulging me in that icebreaker. So going back to the beginning for a minute, can you just give us a sense of how you got here and maybe highlight one or two kind of crucible moments or decisions that brought you to lower carbon?
Yeah, I got mixed up in all this after joining Lowercase Capital, which is the predecessor to Lower Carbon. My partners in this work, Chris and Crystal Sacca, founded Lowercase, one of the original seed funds in venture, and went on to build an organization that is definitely in the pantheon of venture capital, the highest returning fund of all time that, backed a bunch of household name businesses. We were starting to look for new frontiers. I think the state of early stage consumer and enterprise technology in that period was a little disappointing. It just didn't really seem to, or us, for us at least, didn't feel like it was meeting the moment. And on the list of areas that we were curious about exploring, climate was close to the top. And Chris and I had both in our own ways had brushes with Clean Tech 1.0. And I will admit today that we approached this space with some pretty strong biases, that you needed $1 billion of CapEx just to kind of get out the gate. And for the business models to pencil out, you needed policies to change. And nothing about that felt particularly investable to us. But we, against our better judgment, just started hanging out with entrepreneurs, sitting in labs, trying to catch up on the latest science. And it was in the course of doing that work that we met entrepreneurs that completely changed our perspective on what was possible. I think one of the early teams that got us thinking differently about this space and what was possible was Solugen. It's a company based in Houston that makes industrial chemicals, except instead of using fossil fuels as their input, they're using enzymatic processes that wipe out nearly all of the carbon emissions associated with these chemicals that are literally the building blocks of our modern society. And the team at Solugen caught our attention because their first customers were people in the oil and gas industry who weren't sitting there like counting up the scope 3 emissions
Yeah.
of their products and services. They were buying from Solugen because it was the same molecules that they were buying from the other side of the world, except these ones came from down the street in Houston and they cost the same. And for us, this recognition that the underlying technologies had evolved so rapidly that this was possible came as a big surprise. And so for us, those were the kinds of conversations early on where we realized, wait a second, we've been thinking about this all wrong. And the technologies that we thought were so expensive and going to require massive amounts of lab space and decades and hundreds, if not billions of dollars just to prove out the core science, that dynamic has completely shifted. And now for just a few $1,000,000, the same amount of money you might put into the seed round for a software business, you can de-risk big chunks of the technology, big chunks of the R&D, and put yourself in a position where you're selling into multi-$100 billion, if not $1 trillion industries. And so over the last few years, we've built up a portfolio of companies that do the same thing, where we take a lot of technology risk on the front end, but when Antora goes to sell industrial heat to their customers across heavy industry in the United States, they know exactly what parameters they need to hit. And today, they're out competing natural gas in big chunks of the country, selling industrial heat to customers like the ethanol industry, who likewise aren't out there carefully monitoring their scope 3 carbon emissions. They're doing this because it's good for their bottom line. And that's the transformation that we're investing in.
That's awesome, and I appreciate the specific example of Solugen company I personally had never heard of, and it's an amazing case in point of kind of this. It's better for consumers, it's better for businesses, and it's also better for the planet. All of those things coming together. I'm curious what your take is on the moment that we're in right now, where there aren't that many headlines about cases like that. There's a lot of headlines about policy and about the fact and about politics. Where are we right now? Are we looking at a fundamental change in the climate economy, or is it quietly continuing on the same trajectory?
The only thing that's really changed is the vocabulary that people use to describe it.
Hmm.
When we got started, we told people at that time that the same companies we were investing in because they were going to help keep the planet habitable for 8 going on 10 billion people, eventually other investors would come along, look at those same companies and say, hey, that looks like a great national security investment that's going to help reshore this critical industry or de-risk a supply chain whose fundamental frailty got blown up during COVID. And for us, that was a win, not some sort of loss to be bemoaned.
Yeah.
The moment that people understand the alpha that exists in investing in companies that reshore critical industries, that reduce emissions in the process, that help us to lead more prosperous lives without turning the entire planet into an open pit mine, that's the day we win. And for us, nothing about that fundamental thesis has changed. In fact, in a weird way, it feels more secure than ever. And if you just take a few steps back and you abstract yourself from the last 6 months of policy debates in this country, and I think about this all the time. If you told me back in the summer of 2021, before the Inflation Reduction Act was even on the table, that 5 years later, we would have a policy baseline that looks like the one that we have right now, that massively subsidizes a transition of many industrial sectors. And it has the fingerprints of both the Republican and Democratic Party slathered all over it, I would have been thrilled. And that's exactly the position that we're in today. The interesting thing is that, again, while the vocabulary is different from one side to the other, a lot of the aims are actually similar. And that's not to greenwash, I think, a lot of the things that we hear about from the current administration. But I was in DC a few months ago, and I actually heard Doug Burgum speak. He's the Secretary of Interior and the chair of the National Energy Dominance Council, I think is what it's called. And Doug Burgum got up on stage and he said, look, my big priorities in this job are energy supremacy, access to critical minerals in the US and with our allied countries, superiority in AI, and transformation of our advanced manufacturing economy. And I looked down, I thought, hey, those are kind of my priorities too. Now, again, like he likes to talk about the benefits of metallurgical coal, and I chuckle when I hear that. But there's actually broader alignment when you can kind of get past a lot of the nomenclature and realize that the broad vision of whether you want to call it American dynamism or global resilience, and building a future that is sustainable and habitable for everyone here, but also billions of other people around the world. Those things are not inconsistent, and in fact, a lot of those goals and objectives are overlapping.
Yeah. At the same time, though, we're in a moment where, we used to laud bipartisanship, and now it's kind of a dirty word, not something people talk about as a benefit. And a lot of our listeners are sustainability professionals who are working in big companies and have to kind of figure out how to navigate this moment. Do you have any tips on the language people should be using or the ways to navigate this kind of new vocabulary?
Yeah, I'll just, point out that even saying sustainability professional sometimes seems like a dirty word these days. And so
Yeah.
it gets right at the crux of the issue without opining from on high, because I think that people have to figure out the very specific dynamics and politics of their organizations, the geographies where they work, the industries that they're sitting in. But what we've found at Lower Carbon to be very successful, and it's not just a matter of vocabulary or rhetoric, it's core to what we do, is a belief that fundamentally you cannot ask people to shrink their lives, to live with smaller constraints, to abandon air travel that magically drops you off on the other side of the world, or the diets that they enjoy and that make their children healthy in the name of sustainability and climate. That's just a losing issue 10
Yeah.
times out of 10. The more that we can move away from this dilemma between a life of more and a life of less, but that's also sustainable for the planet, and asking people to make this impossible choice for themselves and their families, and instead find a middle ground that offers more food, bigger homes, more access to electricity and transportation, and doing it in a way that doesn't pollute our air and water and our bodies. That's where I think that we can find success and move away from a lot of the political battles that have plagued this space for decades.
Yeah. It's great. It's a super inspiring vision. So let's talk brass tacks for a minute. You guys work with a lot of companies that are disrupting this in one way as a newcomer into a space, disrupting that space. We work with a lot of established companies that are trying to disrupt themselves from within, do things differently. And it's hard sometimes for these companies to find ways that don't feel reductive. Like, I guess I have to, especially if you calculate spend based emissions, okay, spend less on marketing and we have fewer emissions from marketing is one example. So they have to get really creative. And I'm curious if you have any examples or thoughts on how established companies, long running enterprises can take advantage of this opportunity to do well by the planet and do well in their business.
Yeah, not only can those companies achieve exactly the dynamic that you're talking about, but they're already doing it every day. One early conversation that we had over and over again when we were building Lower Carbon at the very beginning and talking with CEOs of big global conglomerates who had made these big commitments to hitting net zero by 2030 or keeping the planet below 1.5 degrees, which is obviously at this point in the rearview mirror. Um, they would come back to this point, which is, hey, we're serious about this commitment. Like we really want to live up to it. We just have no idea how we're going to make it. What can you point us in the right direction? What do you have? And so this is a question we're familiar with, and the answer can take a lot of different forms. I mean,
Yeah.
for one thing, you can sign up for Watershed, right? Like if you don't have the answers at your disposal, companies like Watershed literally exist to point you in the right direction. That's usually the first answer I give when people ask me how to get started, but it's far from the end of the list. We have pointed to Lumen, for example, who are helping to monetize all the rooftop space in industrial America to install solar panels and bring energy costs down while also wiping out emissions. We have companies at this stage who are buying tax credits on the Crux platform, and in the process of bringing down their annual tax bills are also helping to finance big advanced manufacturing and green energy projects. Lots of tech companies have started thinking about how to get access to greener compute, and they're buying their
Yeah.
GPUs from Crusoe. So there are already lots of options that are available out there, and it just depends on the industry that you're in. But this idea that households are going to reduce their emissions by eating half as many calories is just as poisonous in a corporate sphere where you're going to ask people to stop growing their business in the name of reducing their carbon footprint. It just doesn't work. So you have to give people options that allow them to keep growing their business, to creating value without driving emissions. And I'll go back to the example I already gave you in Solugen. They're selling to a bunch of customers that you and I, if we were looking at them, would say those are customers working in really dirty industries. But suddenly one of the key inputs is much cleaner. And that's the transition that we need to drive every single day.
Yeah. Um, didn't ask you to give that tee up for Watershed, but thank you for that one. I think another thing we see often is when companies get really granular in measuring their emissions, they are also looking at the rest of their business in a newly granular way and can find a lot of operational efficiencies as well as opportunities to invest their money in different ways and run their business more, efficiently and in a more modern way, which can be helpful too.
Totally. And by
Um,
the way, if you just look at the set of large public companies that are undertaking those challenges, and if you think of that work as a proxy for far-seeing leadership, those are some of the best performing companies in the market today. And I think like carbon removal is one such proxy. If you look at the companies that have made the biggest commitments to buying carbon removal, they're the ones that are up the highest this year. And so sometimes, again, people see this as like a form of virtue signaling. I look at it as a form of future signaling. Who's thinking about like where the world is going to be 5, 10, 15 years from now and trying to get ahead of the curve? And so this doesn't need to just be a matter of living up to sustainability targets that CEOs and their leadership team set before they had any idea how to solve them. This can be a matter of positioning yourself as a future leader of industry.
yes, totally. I think it goes back to what you said about kind of the long-term view. We will have to solve this as a species eventually. And so the companies that are getting ahead of it, regardless of the politics of the moment, are the ones that are establishing that future proofing for themselves, for lack of a better word.
Definitely.
So sometimes the AI boom is positioned in opposition to clean tech, both in terms of the amount of energy it requires and then the competition for talent, investment dollars, general attention. How do you see the big leaps in LLMs and other AI technology impacting the climate economy?
Depending on who you listen to, AI is either the worst thing that's ever happened to the planet, or if you hang out in the lower carbon Slack, it is one of the biggest opportunities we've had to drive a lot of these technologies forward. At the end of the day, we will only succeed in driving the type of transformation we've been talking about in the course of this podcast, but for the last few years of our lives, Alexa, if we can offer people solutions that are better, faster, cheaper. And in AI, that decision is as clear cut as it is in any other industry. If you can offer data centers that go up faster with more sustainable components, you're going to win. If you can provide energy that is cheaper and faster to deploy, you're going to win. If you can provide products and services that will eat up the hundreds of billions of dollars of annual spend on AI infrastructure, from the roads to the building materials, and those happen to have fewer carbon emissions, you are going to win. We are not going to get brownie points for being cleaner, though. We have to win on the basis of our bottom line impact for the companies that are building out the data centers and building the models, and ultimately going to be financing the ascent of AI. So people know about Crusoe that have made their name building data centers that draw on clean energy to offer the most efficient compute. It's great to be able to tell your customers that these are the cleanest GPUs that they can get access to. But it's even better when they happen to be the cheapest.
I love it. Just reinforces your point again that it's all about the bottom line, the pragmatism. It doesn't have to be about bleeding heart, save the planet, because the solutions are just better. Okay, here's my spicy question. Why is climate political? What happened here? We kind of have the science and seems like something that is fundamental to the survival of humanity. How did we get in this situation where it's a dirty word to say climate change and kind of the whole debate is politicized?
Climate, for one thing, has always been political. And it's political because a lot of people and industries have a vested interest in the status quo and keeping things the way that they are. This is not unique to climate. Any large scale transformation in political and economic transformation in human history has always been political because it involves trade-offs. And in this case, the trade-offs are very visceral for people. They are tangible. They affect how they live their day-to-day lives. So it would have been naive to expect anything else. I want to go back to the question we just talked about. I think part of the way that we deal with this, that we emerge from this kind of trench warfare that exists between the left and the right in the US, but in many other economies around the world, we're never going to get out of that dynamic any other way except building our way out. And this isn't just like some pie in the sky, hopey changey stuff that I'm talking about. Go look at Greg Abbott's Twitter timeline. That guy in Texas who, is not exactly all about transcending political and partisan divides, right? He's embroiled in a now very public fight about redistricting. That same guy is bragging about being number one in solar and number one in wind, and he's probably not very far away from telling you about how many batteries they have installed in Texas. And that's something that 5 or 10 years ago you couldn't imagine. And the reason that he has the political space to do that and that he wants to take credit is because that's directly beneficial to the economy in that state, where they now today they employ more people working in clean and renewable energies than they do in oil and gas. And that transformation is the only transformation that will help us to get out of this current tit for tat dynamic.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a perfect example. I was going to give the example of my Republican next door neighbor who keeps asking me what my power bill is since we installed solar. And I'm like, you got to come over to this side, man. It's a lot cheaper.
It's a lot cheaper. You can be independent from the bandits of the utility that are stealing your paycheck, and
Totally.
and frame it in ways that that speak to the values of the other side. Because again, it's not disingenuous. It's authentic to how these technologies work and what they enable.
I think it's such a great note to end on. And it's great advice for anyone working in sustainability, honestly, to think about your audience and to bring the story that will resonate with them, regardless of politics. Like, let's all take that on as our action item from this meeting. Thank you, Clay, so much. It's been super inspiring to hear from you today.
Thanks so much, Alexa.